Sequin, and in this video I'm going to be attempting to make a game soundtrack piece in the style of Perfect Dark for the N64. The original soundtrack was produced by Grant Kirkhope with additional contributions from Graham Norgate and David Kleinig. While I had an N64 growing up, I never had the chance to play Perfect Dark, but I always really liked the soundtrack's combination of espionage and techno elements. I've just recently started playing it and realized that the game itself is a huge technical achievement. For this session, I really wanted to focus on the structure of the track and make sure the elements fit together to result in something that wouldn't be out of place for this era. I'm currently using Logic Pro 11.0.1. Let's get into it. I started with Audio Modern's Playbeat 4 to use that as a reference point for the rhythm that I wanted. Drop the Bass is a free bass rompler by Elements that is free forever. I'll leave the link in the description. To begin with, I used a pad from a sample library and together with Elements used Riffer by Audio Modern to sequence a simple bass part. I tried processing the pad with Arturia EFX Refract, but wasn't quite getting the result that I wanted. So I went to EFX Motions and used the two together. There's a step-based sequencer that allows you to add freezing and stuttering effects that would otherwise be time-consuming to program. Scalar 3 to create more structure by implementing a simple chord progression. Don't be afraid to use a commonly used chord progression. Now you're seeing me record the live input from K-Device's Tat-Tat and catching a bass line. I like to lengthen the drums and add different parts when I get a sense they should change naturally. This is another method of creating structure. Adding another bass line here. The truth is that sometimes you'll be hearing your track so many times when you're working on it that you might start to think you hate it when you really don't. Gorilla is a bass processing plugin that I really like that was offered as a freebie recently. It sort of gives this guitar effect to the bass. I'm layering that hit with a reverse of itself so it doesn't sound so sudden. Here I'm using EFX Motions to add some panning to the bass. And a pretty fast hat rhythm to give some more tension. Here I'm using Magic Carpet by Unplug Red. I messed with this for quite a while. Mainly I wanted to get a really nice tail to the reverb. Quantum Distortion by GSDSP. To add variety, you can sometimes mix two different types of processing and morph from one to the other using automation, which is what I'm doing here. Now I'm using EFX motions again to add a smearing effect to this pad. Here is Valhalla Supermassive to add a rhythmic reverb effect to this pizzicato sound, and adding in a choral effect with reverb from Xenology. Again, I'm processing this pad with two different effects and morphing from one to the other using automation, and then bouncing that down. I like how this turned out quite a bit. Then there's this little flyby Brahm sort of effect, using Supermassive on that as well. And then here, Gooper by Brando is being used for this staircase flange effect that I think goes pretty nicely with the increase in percussion. I ended up turning this clap part pretty low in the mix. Here I'm kind of looking for the right sound for this percussion part. I used motions again to remix this formant sound from the JV1080. point, I tried to add this subtle choral effect that has the same descending chord pattern with a lift at the end, which gives it this uncanny effect. It was pretty quiet, so I brought it up with Woe TT and added GRFX by Imaginando for shimmer. The side stick part is brought to you by the JV1080. It sits pretty low in the mix, not as loud as here. Processing that bass line. This next part is when I really started to feel things were coming together. Ascending and descending chord variation. I'm tweaking the shimmer effect a little more here. Long tail at the end. Digitalis by Aberrant DSP for an intentionally downsampled effect on that bass line from earlier. It didn't quite sound right until I added this. Thing where I didn't realize scaler wasn't syncing with my DAW, even though I had DAW sync on, and I kept thinking I was going crazy because it was changing the BPM exactly where I was importing the MIDI and throwing everything off, which is why I ended up recording instead a couple times. It's pretty funny. Here the sound was a bit too prominent, so I used Mixbox to bury it a little in the background. And there you have it. I'm pretty happy with how this turned out, even though there were some flaws along the way. Don't get the impression that this all took 13 minutes though. This whole thing took a lot of starts and stops and stalls. I actually think this is pretty normal for producers in general, so just know that it took over an hour. I really liked this process though, and I think I'm definitely going to tackle some other games to do this with. If you have any suggestions, I'd like to hear them in the comments. See you next time.